Hello, dear story lovers. At the amount of 1,000 subscribers, I will post a huge series of special stories for you. Subscribe now. The Galactic Arena was a marvel of cruelty, a sprawling coliseum carved into the heart of the moon's Arian. Its towering walls shimmered with an iridescent sheen, an effect of rare minerals that naturally absorbed and refracted the vibrant lights of nearby stars. From orbit, Zarian seemed alive, pulsating with neon hues, a beacon to thrill-seekers, gamblers, and bloodthirsty spectators from across the Zetran system. It was a place where wealth was amassed, lives were destroyed, and hope was a commodity more precious than starlight. Kyra stood in the center of the arena, her wrists bound by heavy, humming energy chains that pulsed with every move she made. The chains weren't just physical constraints, they sapped her strength, a constant reminder of her captivity. Around her, the deafening roar of the crowd echoed through the dome. Alien voices, metallic and guttural, melded into an overwhelming cacophony of excitement. They shouted, jeered, and laughed, betting their fortunes on who would live and who would die. She scanned the audience with narrowed eyes, her defiance burning like a flame that refused to be extinguished. The sight disgusted her. Beings of all shapes and sizes lounged in hovering platforms or luxury pods, sipping exotic drinks and devouring strange foods as they treated the brutality below as mere entertainment. Her hands tightened into fists. If there was one thing Kyra had learned in her time here, it was that the arena didn't care who you were or where you came from. The rich watched, the poor fought, and the system fed on suffering. A voice boomed across the arena, amplified by drones hovering above. It belonged to Zilkir the Overseer, the sadistic alien who managed the games. Behold! Zilkir bellowed, his voice grating like rusted gears grinding together. Tonight, a special treat for our esteemed patrons. The Earthling Kyra faces her most fearsome challenge yet, Nagrath the Colossus. The crowd erupted as the gates at the far end of the arena opened with a rumbling groan. From the shadows emerged a massive figure, towering nearly 3 times Kyra's height. Nagrath was a hulking beast with 6 muscled arms, skin as tough as asteroid rock, and a face that bore no hint of mercy. He wielded twin battle axes that crackled with energy, each swing of the blades leaving a faint trail of light in the air. Kyra's heart pounded, but fear had long since given way to instinct. She shifted her stance, assessing her opponent with sharp precision. Nagrath was slow, but his reach and strength could end her in a single blow. She had to be fast, lightning fast. Let the fight begin. Zilkir roared, and the arena's force field shimmered to life, sealing her in with the Colossus. Nagrath charged, his heavy footfalls sending tremors through the ground. Kyra dove to the side, rolling just as one of his axes cleaved through the air where she'd stood moments before. She felt the hum of its energy blade as it missed her by inches. She sprang to her feet, using the momentum to dash behind him, aiming for his unprotected back. But the chains on her wrists slowed her, and Nagrath twisted with surprising agility, swinging his second axe in a wide arc. Kyra ducked, the blade slicing through the space above her. Her mind raced. The chains were not just a hindrance, they were a death sentence. She had to turn the odds in her favor, and fast. The crowd's roars grew louder as the fight intensified, a cruel symphony of excitement. Kyra feigned a stumble, drawing Nagrath closer. He lunged, raising both axes high for a killing blow. At the last second, she dropped flat to the ground, kicking out with her legs to sweep his feet. He staggered, his balance momentarily broken. Without hesitation, Kyra surged to her feet and climbed up his massive form like a cat scaling a tree. She wrapped the energy chains around his throat, using her full body weight to pull tight. Nagrath bellowed in rage, thrashing wildly, his axes flailing as he tried to pry her off. The chains crackled, their energy burning into his tough skin. The crowd screamed in a mix of shock and delight. Kyra's grip began to falter as the chains drained her strength, but she held on, her teeth clenched, her resolve unyielding. Just as Nagrath began to slow, his massive hand reached back and wrenched her off, throwing her to the ground with bone-shaking force. Pain shot through her, but she forced herself to stand, her breath ragged. As the Colossus staggered, gasping and weakened, Kyra knew this was her moment. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, she charged at him, leaping high and delivering a crushing kick to his head. Nagrath collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in deafening cheers. Zulkir's voice cut through the noise. Victory! The Earthling triumphs again. Kyra's chest heaved as she stood over her fallen opponent. But there was no satisfaction in her victory, only the bitter taste of survival. She knew what came next, another fight, another day of being a pawn in this grotesque spectacle. But as she glanced at the crowd, her gaze caught a figure in the shadows, a man, human like her, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through the chaos. For the first time in a long time, something stirred in Kyra's heart, hope. The Galactic Arena's underground holding cells reeked of sweat and despair. Flickering lights cast long shadows across damp walls, their dim glow doing little to illuminate the gloom. Kyra sat on the cold metal floor, her back against the wall, her wrists still marked by the faint burns of the energy chains. Her body ached from the fight, but the pain was nothing new. It was part of the rhythm of her existence now: fight, survive, heal just enough, and repeat. Her mind, however, was far from the cell. She couldn't stop thinking about the man in the shadows, the human who had stood out in the sea of alien faces. He wasn't like the others. His expression hadn't been one of sadistic pleasure or idle curiosity. It had been sharp, focused, almost deliberate. Before she could dwell further, the heavy clang of a door opening pulled her attention. 2 armored guards entered, their reptilian features cold and impassive. Behind them, a smaller figure emerged, a wiry, insectoid creature carrying a tray of food and water. The guards shoved the tray toward her without a word and stepped back, their blasters ready should she try anything. Eat. You'll need your strength for tomorrow, one of them hissed in a guttural voice before they all filed out, leaving her alone once more. Kyra stared at the unappetizing meal but didn't touch it. Her thoughts wandered back to Earth, to the life she'd had before the pirates had snatched her from her home. She'd been training for a national martial arts competition, dreaming of the Olympics, when her world was ripped apart. Now her skills were used to entertain sadists across the galaxy. She clenched her fists. She wouldn't die here. She couldn't. Meanwhile, in a shadowy corner of the arena's spectator quarters, Rian sat at a small table in a bustling cantina, nursing a drink. His sharp, green eyes surveyed the crowd as he subtly accessed the schematics of the arena on his wrist-mounted holo device. The device projected a faint blue hologram onto the table, displaying a map of the facility. He zoomed in on the prisoner cells. Rian wasn't here by accident. Weeks ago, he had been on the trail of the Xyrath artifact, a priceless relic stolen by the same space pirates who had captured Kyra. His search had led him to the Galactic Arena, where he'd learned the pirates often sold their captives to Zulkir as gladiators. That's when he'd seen her. The Earthling. Kyra. She wasn't just another prisoner forced to fight. There was something about her determination, her refusal to give in, that struck a chord in him. Maybe it was the memory of his sister, who had been taken in a raid years ago. Maybe it was the gnawing guilt of having escaped his own capture while others hadn't. Whatever it was, it compelled him to act. As Rian finalized his plan, the bartender, a squat, one-eyed alien with a sly grin, shuffled over. "Planning something dangerous, aren't you?" the bartender rasped, his voice dripping with intrigue. "I've seen that look before." Rian didn't bother denying it. "What do you know about the Earthling gladiator?" The bartender's grin widened. "Kyra, you mean? Tough one, that. Never seen a human last this long in the games. Zulkir likes her brings in the big bets." "And her cell?" Rian asked casually, though his voice held an edge. The bartender's single eye gleamed with amusement. "You're bold, I'll give you that. But Zulkir's no fool. Security's tighter than a vault. Even if you got in, you'd have the whole moon on you in seconds. Rian leaned in, lowering his voice. What if I could cut the power to the cells? Create a distraction? The bartender's grin faded, replaced by a wary look. You're serious? Dead serious. The bartender studied him for a moment before leaning closer. There's a service hatch below the arena accessed from the maintenance tunnels. If you're fast and smart, you might have a shot. But don't expect me to save your skin if you get caught. Rian slid a small pouch of credits across the table. You've already helped enough. That night, Kyra sat in her cell, staring at the dim light overhead. Suddenly, the hum of the energy barriers lining the hallway flickered. She frowned, sitting up. Moments later, the power cut completely, plunging the cells into darkness. Shouts and cries echoed as the other prisoners realized what was happening. Then, the sound of boots against metal, soft, deliberate, and fast. Kyra tensed, her instincts on high alert. Through the shadows, she saw him, the human man from the crowd. He moved swiftly, a blaster in one hand and a small device in the other, which he used to disable the locking mechanisms on the cells. He stopped in front of hers. Kyra, right? He asked, his voice low and calm despite the chaos around them. Her eyes narrowed. Who's asking? Name's Rian. Let's just say I don't like the idea of you dying for Zulkir's entertainment. Before she could respond, he deactivated the energy barrier. We don't have much time. Can you walk? Kyra stood, her posture wary. I can fight. Rian smirked. Good. We'll need that. Alarms blared as the guards realized the power outage wasn't accidental. Rian tossed her a spare blaster. Stick close, and try not to get killed. Together, they sprinted into the darkness of the tunnels, their escape just beginning. For the first time since her capture, Kyra felt the stirrings of something she thought she'd lost forever, the hope of freedom. The tunnels beneath the Galactic Arena were a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and dimly lit passageways that snaked deep into the moon's rocky core. Rian led the way, his blaster in one hand and his hollow device in the other, the faint blue glow of the schematics illuminating his sharp features. Kyra followed close behind, her senses sharp and her grip firm on the blaster he'd given her. You're sure you know where we're going? Kyra asked, her voice low but laced with skepticism. Rian glanced over his shoulder, a sly grin tugging at his lips. I'm winging it. Try to keep up. Kyra rolled her eyes but said nothing. She was too busy listening for the sound of pursuit. It didn't take long. Behind them, the unmistakable sound of heavy boots on metal echoed through the tunnels. Alien guards, their guttural voices barking commands, were closing in fast. The faint red flicker of their searchlights bounced off the walls, casting eerie shadows that grew larger with each second. They're gaining on us, Kyra warned, picking up her pace. I noticed, Rian replied, scanning the schematics for a way out. There's a maintenance shaft up ahead. If we can dash, a blast of energy sizzled past them, striking the wall and sending sparks flying. The guards were no longer content to chase, they were firing now. Move faster! Rian barked, ducking as another shot whizzed by. He pointed to a junction up ahead where the tunnel split into two paths. Go left. They darted down the left corridor, only to find themselves face to face with a massive gate, its locking mechanism glowing with an ominous red light. Great, Kyra muttered, raising her blaster. Locked. Give me a second, Rian said, kneeling in front of the control panel. He pulled a multi-tool from his belt and began working on the wires with practiced speed. Cover me. Kyra turned, her eyes scanning the tunnel they had just come through. The red glow of the searchlights was brighter now, the voices louder. She raised her blaster and took a deep breath, steadying her aim. The first guard appeared, a hulking reptilian brute with a plasma rifle. Kyra fired, the shot hitting the guard square in the chest. He dropped with a guttural grunt, but more followed, their weapons blazing. "We don't have a second," she shouted, firing again and hitting another guard. "Almost there," Rian muttered, his fingers flying over the wires. Sparks erupted from the panel, and the red light blinked green. The gate groaned as it began to slide open. "Go, go, go!" Rian yelled, grabbing Kyra's arm and pulling her through the gate just as another volley of energy blasts struck the walls behind them. The gate slammed shut, cutting off the guards and giving them a momentary reprieve. They found themselves in a vast maintenance chamber, its ceiling soaring high above them and its walls lined with pipes and control consoles. In the center of the room, a massive cylindrical shaft stretched upward, its surface dotted with rungs that led to a hatch at the top. "That's our way out," Rian said, pointing to the shaft. Kyra eyed the rungs. "Climbing? Seriously?" "Unless you have a better idea," Rian replied, already heading toward the shaft. Before they could begin their ascent, a low growl filled the chamber. Kyra turned, her heart sinking as she saw a massive silhouette emerge from the shadows. It was one of the arena's enforcers, a Zargan brute, easily twice the size of a human, with thick, armored skin and glowing red eyes. In its massive hands, it wielded a spiked club that crackled with energy. "Let me guess," Kyra said, raising her blaster. "You didn't plan for this?" Rian grinned, drawing his own weapon. "I like to keep things interesting." The Zargan charged, its footsteps shaking the ground. Kyra and Rian fired simultaneously, but the brute's armored hide absorbed the blasts with little effect. It swung its club in a wide arc, forcing them to dive in opposite directions. "Distract it!" Rian shouted, rolling to his feet. "Why do I have to distract it?" Kyra retorted, dodging another swing. "Because I have a plan." Kyra gritted her teeth and fired at the Zargan's face, aiming for its glowing red eyes. The shots made it roar in anger, its attention fully focused on her. It charged, its club raised high, but she was already moving, leading it toward the base of the shaft. Rian, meanwhile, had scrambled onto one of the control consoles. He yanked open a panel and began rewiring the circuits, his movements frantic but precise. "Just a little longer," he called out. The Zargan swung its club again, narrowly missing Kyra as she slid under a pipe. She fired again, hitting one of its eyes and making it bellow in pain. "Now!" Rian shouted. Kyra dove out of the way as Rian activated the console. A surge of electricity arced through the Zargan, channeled from the pipes lining the chamber. The brute let out a deafening roar before collapsing to the ground, its massive body twitching as the electricity dissipated. Kyra stood, catching her breath as she looked at Rian. "You could have mentioned that plan earlier." "Where's the fun in that?" he replied, grinning as he climbed onto the first rung of the shaft. "Come on. We're not out of this yet." The climb was grueling, their muscles burning with each rung they ascended. Below, the sound of reinforcements breaching the gate echoed through the chamber. The guards had found them again. Kyra reached the top first, shoving the hatch open and pulling herself into the cool night air. Rian followed seconds later, and they both collapsed onto the moon's rocky surface, gasping for breath. In the distance, the glow of the Galactic arena pulsed like a sinister beacon. Behind them, alarms and shouts grew louder. "We need to keep moving," Rian said, sitting up. He pointed to a small ship parked near the edge of a crater. "That's our ride." Kyra looked at him, her expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. "You really thought of everything, didn't you?" "I try," he said with a smirk. "Now let's go before they catch us." They sprinted toward the ship, the weight of their escape not yet fully hitting them. For the first time in years, Kyra felt a sliver of freedom within reach. But she knew this was only the beginning. The stolen ship hummed to life as Kyra and Rian settled into the cockpit. Its controls were an alien design, a hybrid of glowing interfaces and physical levers, but Rian moved with the confidence of someone who had stolen more than his share of ships. Kyra took the co-pilot's seat, her hands hovering over the controls as she studied their layout. "Can you fly this thing?" she asked, glancing at Rian. "Fly? Sure. Land? Well, let's not worry about that right now," he quipped, flipping a series of switches. The ship shuddered, then lifted off the moon's rocky surface. Behind them, the alarms from the Galactic arena were deafening, and the glow of pursuing ships igniting their engines cast long shadows over the lunar landscape. "Looks like they're not letting us leave without a fight," Kyra muttered, strapping herself in. "They never do," Rian replied, his grin fading as he focused on the displays. "Hold tight." The ship shot upward, its engines roaring as it breached the moon's thin atmosphere. A warning light blinked on the dashboard, signaling incoming missiles. Rian swore under his breath and yanked the controls to the side. The ship banked sharply, sending Kyra's stomach lurching. "Missiles?" Kyra shouted, gripping the armrests. "You didn't say they'd have missiles. Didn't think they'd go all out for us." Rian retorted, pulling a lever that sent the ship into a steep dive. The first missile streaked past, missing by inches and exploding in the void beyond. The shockwave rattled their ship, but it held steady. Kyra's eyes darted to a console displaying the ship's weapon systems. "We've got guns. Let me handle this." Rian glanced at her, his lips twitching into a smirk. "Be my guest." Kyra leaned forward, her fingers flying over the controls as she activated the ship's laser cannons. She swiveled the targeting system, locking onto the nearest pursuing ship. With a squeeze of the trigger, a bolt of searing energy lanced out, striking the enemy vessel. It erupted in a fiery explosion. "That's one," she said, a fierce grin spreading across her face. The remaining ships split into evasive maneuvers, their pilots realizing Kyra wasn't a defenseless escapee. She fired again, hitting another ship and forcing the rest to fall back. For a brief moment, the starry expanse around them was clear. Rian exhaled, relaxing slightly as he set the ship on autopilot. "Not bad. I'm starting to see why you survived the arena." Kyra shot him a sideways glance. "You've seen nothing yet." Once they were safely out of range, Rian leaned back in his seat and pulled up a star map on the central display. "All right, where do we go from here?" "The outer colonies are a possibility, but they're crawling with bounty hunters. And if Zilkir puts a price on our heads and they'll all come running." Kyra steadied the map, her mind racing. "What about Terra Station? It's a free zone, right?" Rian raised an eyebrow. "It's free, sure. But it's also chaotic. Pirates, smugglers, and mercenaries everywhere. Not exactly a vacation spot." "Perfect," Kyra said. "It's where we can disappear." Rian considered this, then nodded. "All right. Terra Station it is. But once we're there, we'll need a plan. Zilkir won't stop hunting us. Neither will the arena. They'll make an example out of us if they catch us." Kyra's jaw tightened. "Then we fight back." Rian stared at her, taken aback by the intensity in her voice. "Fight back? Against Zilkir? Against the arena? That's ambitious." "It's not just about us," Kyra said, leaning forward. "How many others are trapped in that place? Forced to fight, forced to kill, just to survive another day? We can't just walk away and pretend it's over." Rian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You do realize this isn't some noble rebellion story, right? It's the real world. And in the real world, people who challenge the arena end up dead." "Maybe," Kyra said, her gaze unwavering. "But if we don't do something, we're no better than they are. I'm not asking you to fight with me. But I am going to fight." Rian stared at her for a long moment, then let out a resigned chuckle. "You're stubborn. I'll give you that. It's kept me alive this long," she replied. The journey to Terra Station took several hours, during which Kyra and Rian worked to modify the ship's transponder codes to avoid detection. Rian showed her how to navigate the ship's systems, and Kyra shared more about her life before the arena, about Earth, about her family, and about the dreams she'd had before it was all ripped away. When they finally arrived, Terra Station loomed before them like a metal leviathan. The massive freeport hung in the void, its tangled web of platforms, docking bays, and glowing signs creating a chaotic but strangely beautiful mosaic. Ships of all shapes and sizes came and went, each carrying beings from countless worlds. As they docked, Rian leaned back and exhaled. "Welcome to Terra Station. Keep your guard up. Trust no one." "I'll manage," Kyra said, standing and checking the blaster at her hip. "What's next?" Rian hesitated, then turned to her with a rare seriousness. "Next, we survive. Then, we find a way to make them pay." Kyra nodded, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. For the first time in years, she wasn't just fighting to survive, she was fighting for something bigger. And with Rian at her side, she knew she had a chance. As they stepped out onto the crowded, chaotic streets of Terra Station, the future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of possibilities. Together, they would navigate the dangers ahead, their bond forged in the fires of the arena. And they would do what no one else had dared, take on the Galactic arena and the forces that fed its cruelty. For freedom. For justice. For a galaxy that had forgotten what those words meant.